they need to later on in life.
Learning about and being part of the performing arts gives you life skills no matter what career you go into. It will give you a toolbox of tricks. They are there for the taking to deliver whatever you need.
Arts International provides world-class
Thank you for coming, everyone.
and coaching to children and young people all over the world.
Drama helps us to build resilience, and it helps us to cope with the uncertainty all around us, especially in the modern world.
A student can expect to experience a lot of fun, but also a lot of exploration about themselves as human beings.
Think of 3 words while you're watching, please, and write them down.
It's not just singing, dancing and acting. It's about presence, it's about presentation, it's about life skills. It's listening, it's speaking, communicating, all the things that we all need every single day of our lives.
So thank you, everyone, for being here. I am so excited. And let me introduce myself.
I think performing arts.
I am Nancy Lhoest-Squicciarini, and you are the first to be here for the launch of the ECIS Studio. So thank you so much for being here. We are thrilled, and we want to know something about you, because when we think about the ECIS Studio, we also think about the idea of building a sense of community. So what I would like you to do now is think of 6 words that describes you. So my 6 words are: I'm a trainer for ECIS. I like to think I'm enthusiastic and positive about what goes on. I like to read. I get kicked out of book clubs because my book's really bad. I love walking, and I love promoting connections. So right now, could you please think of 6 words that describe yourself and type it in the chat, but don't press enter yet. You can't press enter yet because we're going to do a cascade. Don't press enter yet. Think of your 6 words. 6 words in the chat. You are seeing mine right now. But we're going to give people processing time to think of how would they describe themselves only in 6 words. And if you give me a thumbs up, that tells me you're ready. So I see some thumbs up. Okay, are we ready to start seeing what and who is here today? So on the count of 3, everybody, 1, 2, 3, press enter, and let's see our chat cascade. Eccentric, fun, caring, friendly. Charlene, thank you for being here. Reader. Caroline, enthusiastic. You are kind. We just love you.
Caroline.
We love Caroline. And then we have Amy about being a mom. Alita, confident, passionate. Oh, we see a lot of compassion. Those are some of the words we might be hearing today as well. Thank you for sharing. Oh, I love this. Organized, caring. We have Charlotte here. Thank you, everyone. So you're probably wondering what is, now that we have an idea of who's here, what is the ECIS Studio? Well, the studio is actually a new initiative this year because ECIS had the podcast, we had the Loft, we had Canned Conversations, and now they're all under one roof, which is called the ECIS Studio. So we're thrilled that you are here for the initial launch. So if you want to unmute, we can go, yep, this is the launch of the studio. So we're thrilled, we're thrilled, we're thrilled. So how are we going to be working today? So first of all, our virtual meeting protocols are in the chat. If you want to share your Twitter handle, please do. If you're tweeting, our hashtag is ECIS Studio. Next, we're going to have a breakout session because we want you to, we're always promoting the idea of community and you to connect with somebody. And you might say after this session, I really enjoyed meeting Shandy or Charlene, and you might even ask for their email address because you enjoyed meeting with them. During the big session, you don't have to have your video on. I know it's a long day, so you might just want to have your video off. But when we do a breakout room, please have your video on. And lastly, use the chat feature to connect with one another and have the idea that, just so you know, this session is being recorded, but the breakout rooms are not, because we love sharing what the learning that goes on today afterwards. before we go on to meeting our special guest today, the studio is thrilled because we're already planning our upcoming guests. So we're going to have students from the International School of Helsinki talk about their leadership program. So we are absolutely thrilled, and we're going to have Rachel Thrash with us. Next, we're going to have David Willows and Paulette, and they have a new company that they're working on, which is called the Yellow Car. And more importantly, they talk about the idea of advancement. And they're actually very, very dear people. I had incredible experiences with them. So I'm thrilled they're going to be on the studio. So can't wait for those. So keep out for those upcoming studios. So how are we going to work today? We're going to talk about some competencies. We're going to have a breakout session because we want you to meet one another. And then we are going to go back to Andrew and Amy, and then we'll have a closure, and we'll be finishing up in 1 hour. So thank you for being here. So for our first ever ECIS Studio, we have two people that I met last April. And as soon as I have to admit, Andrew and Amy, it was almost like I met my friends that I should have met 20 years ago. The initial connection were just so authentic and kind, and we connected for many reasons about the impact of the performing arts. We started talking about family, and anytime I meet somebody who talks about family initially, I know their heart is just good. So they just resonated with me. So when Cam, who's the CEO of ECS, said, you have to have Andrew and Amy as your first guest, I was like, oh, will they do it? And they said yes. So I'm going to let Amy and Andrew introduce themselves, but I just want to say thank you so much, because it's a privilege that the launch of the ECS Studio is with you two. So please, Amy, introduce yourself.
Hi. Thank you, Nancy, for that lovely introduction, and I echo it all back to you. It was an absolute joy to meet you back in April. Hello, ECIS community and family. It is a joy to be part of this webinar. My name is Amy Jessop. I am a professional performing artist, so I sing, dance and act and do lots of other stuff in between. And I'm also the lead creative director of Arts International, which is a company that we are going to speak about a little bit this evening. Well, it's this evening for me. I'm in Dubai, so if I reference to this evening, I apologize, but it's what's the time now? 7 o'clock in my body clock. So I trained as an actress. I always wanted to be an actor from the moment that I saw The Sound of Music and Julie Andrews. And so I trained at a place called Mount View Academy of Theatre Arts, which is in London, and did my 3-year degree there and had a fantastic time. And then I was very lucky to go straight into the international tour of Mamma Mia and toured the globe with that show. And it was an absolute joy. And that's where I met my husband. And that kick-started my, kind of private career, as it were, as well. And went on to do some lovely shows like We Will Rock You, which is the Ben Elton and Queen musical. And then very quickly had my son, Oscar, who is now 11, and then very quickly followed Phoebe, who is 7. So primarily I'm a mum, and that's how I identify really, as a mum first and foremost, and a performer second, which I never thought would be the case. I always thought that I would be a performer first and anything else second, but the children stole my heart over performing. And now I get to work with Andrew and our colleague Paul on Arts International, which is an absolute joy. And I will let Andrew now introduce himself, and we'll get chatting a little bit about what we do and why we do it.
Thank you very much, Amy. Nancy, I just had a call from the BBC asking if you could present Drive Time next week, because if someone's gone sick.
BBC Drive Time.
Could you do that for us? It was a treat meeting you in April. You're right. I had dinner with an old friend on first meeting. It was lovely. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Hi, Caroline in particular. How are you doing? Nice to see you. So I'm not a performer, as will become more than evident over this hour. I started my career in human resources working for Marks and Spencer. So I counted blackcurrant yogurts one night in Cardiff as the store began to open. Not as exciting as the Mamma Mia International Tour. After Marks and Spencer, I worked for Marriott and was HR director for Marriott Hotels in Europe. And we ran training programs for aspiring general managers, for heads of departments, and for graduates. And they came out of university and they were very bright. They'd been to the best hotel schools, had all of their stars and the ticks in the right boxes, but couldn't hold a room couldn't deal with a coachload of angry Americans late checking in or a delayed flight at 3 in the morning. They kind of had problems with their executive presence, with standing and being. So we developed some programs working with actors to help them achieve a more three-dimensional approach to their management practice. I moved to McKinsey, was a consultant, and developed similar programs with the same group of actors. And I thought, wow, I've been developing management development programs for 20 years, and I've never seen anything more impactful or more sustaining than the programs we learned from actors. And then one day when I was working as a consultant in Dubai, opening 15 schools, the principal of a school took me into their new professional theatre and said, "What the F do I do with this?" And I said, "It's a professional theatre. We need professional theatre people." So I came to London, met a few of the heads of performing arts schools, and we took them to Dubai, ran some programs, and had a fantastic impact. And I connected my love of the theatre, my love of performers, my love of Amy, don't tell her, and to my work. So that's what we do now. For me, I've turned my passion into a business where we take performers from around the world. No, we don't. We take performers to around the world, from TV, film, and theatre, to inspire confidence, creativity, collaboration, and compassion in students to help them on their way. That's me. Over to you, Nancy.
So this is what I first encountered at the leadership conference, and I was overwhelmed because for me, it wasn't just about the idea of performing arts. It's not about the children engaging in dance or in singing. It was more than that. And that's what resonated with me. It came also a story about my own son, who actually the performance arts, he had a cognitive disorder and he had articulation. He couldn't articulate in the classroom, but get him in front of a theater, all of a sudden, he was a different person. So this is where I'm going to have Andrew talk about the idea of competencies, because we're going to put you in a breakout room for you to discuss competencies as well. So Andrew, why don't you give us our prompt?
All right, let's do that. So what I'd like you to think about in your school or organization, or any organization you've worked in, what are the 3 patterns of behavior, the 3 ways of behaving that leads to high performance? Just think about those 3 things. What are the 3 things that lead to high performance where you work now, or where you've worked before, or where you've seen high performance in action? The 3 things.
Okay, everybody. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put you in a breakout room for, it's about 6 minutes, because this is what I would like you to do. Have a timekeeper and a speaker. So make sure someone can navigate those conversations. Go in there, introduce yourself, your name, your role, share the 3 words if you remember from the video. And also, what do you think are those top 3 competencies that Andrew just mentioned that are ones that, let's see, we elevate or are needed once children leave, let's say, organized educational institutions? Okay, so 3 competencies that you feel that children need. Andrew, am I saying that correctly?
Let me just put that as precisely as I can, just to make sure that we're all clear. So if you think about a high-performing organization that you've worked in or that you know, what are the 3 behaviors or traits or competencies or ways of acting together that make that organization high-performing?
That's it. So we're going to go in there. You have about 6 minutes. I know that's really quick because we want you quick thinking. Then we want you to come back, and we have our rooms, and there's a timer as well. So I'm going to open up the rooms. You have 6 minutes. Introduce yourself. Think of the 3 words and those competencies. Okay, everyone. And say hello to one. I know it's real quick. It's only 6 minutes, but you're going to get to meet each other again. You know what? I might even make it 7 minutes because sometimes it's just nice to talk to you.
You're talking too quickly.
You talk too quickly. All right. I'm going to open up the rooms. Think about those competencies, please. A sense of community. I love when they have recording in progress. I love the idea of building this community of learners, that every time we have a studio, that you leave with a connection. So we're hoping your conversation would have one that was fruitful. And Andrew, why don't we go on to that conversation about getting some people to share those competencies?
Sure. So let's have a look. So if you think about the high performance environment that you've had experience of, what sort of things are the patterns of the behavior that might be recognizable to others?
Does anybody want, you can unmute, by the way, we're a small group. Anybody want to share, what were those competencies that you spoke about within your breakout session? And please unmute, don't worry about it. We can go rogue, we can go crazy right now. So what were those competencies? Anybody want to share a set?
I can get started if you want.
Thank you.
Claudia. Yeah, so it was me and James and Aruj. I know there was some technical difficulties, so we got as far as we could, but we talked about autonomy, that our schools have given us a lot of autonomy, and that when there are meetings about strategic planning or other just initiatives, that the mindset was everyone is new to this, so even if you've worked at the school a while, you should come in and feel free to sort of create new ideas and not just kind of go along with how things have been done before, and that frees people up to think more freely. Always assuming positive intent and the best intentions. So those were some of the things. Oh, and great PD opportunities. So those were some of the things that came in our group.
That's a great conversation. You're looking at what allowed your staff to be high performing is the autonomy. Reminds me of Daniel Pink's book Drive. The idea of being able to have those risks, psychological safety, and then that positive intent. Thank you so much for sharing. That was lovely. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The other group.
They were great, Claudia. Thank you very much. I'll pick up on a few of those when we get a little further on, but thank you.
The other group, anything to share?
We spoke about empowerment, feeling empowered, confidence, being able to rely on other people, feeling of peace and love.
Oh, Caroline, that's beautiful. I love that idea of an effective organization has those competencies. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing, Caroline. So Andrew, I'm going to move it over to you. We had the group share. Now we want to know, what does the research say?
Sure. All right. Thank you very much, Nancy. Thank you, everybody. Claudia, I think you read the book. She's ahead of me already. I did some work with the University of Chicago, actually over 20 years now, that we've been looking at what makes high performance at work. So we studied organizations around the world in different sectors, from airlines in Australia to banks in Brazil, to retailers in Japan, to real estate people in America. And we looked at what creates high performance. So how do you measure high performance? Well, we said we need some ideas or some thoughts that have increased revenue by 10% over the course of a year, or have reduced costs by 10% over the course of a year, or have generated ideas that have created more revenue, reduced costs, or done some initiative that has introduced a new product or service. So those sorts of things are high performance indicators. And we looked at 6 million points of data where people gave us examples of what was high performance. And we said, right, let's cluster those. So if you imagine 6 million Post-it notes in a room with lots of buckets, and we were sorting them all out, and we came to 3 conclusions, regardless of geography, regardless of type of industry or sector, and regardless of seniority. So these elements for high performance are just as important if you're on the front line at McDonald's on a busy Saturday night, if you're running a bank in Japan on a Sunday morning, just as important. The first one is to create high performance. People have to feel valued. So we have to make people who work with us feel valued, not tell them that they're valued, not tell them that our human resources are the most important asset in the business, or our teachers are the most important thing, but they have to feel it on an intuitive, on a head and heart level. They have to know that the people who surround you are valued. Now that looks different in Japan. It can depend on the height of a bow. In the States, it often is bonus linked or incentive linked. But the biggest thing, and I'm reminded of a story when I worked in a real estate business in the UK, where Hugh came into my office one morning. I was HR director. He said, "I'm really pissed off." Tell me, Hugh. My wife's in the Sainsbury's car park. There's £50,000 gone into my bank account. I assume it's a bonus. No one told me I was getting it. It's a tough life for Hugh, isn't it? But the essence of that was, and I'd only been there a week because I'd have sorted it, right? I'd only been there a week, but he had been paid a bonus of £50,000 for his performance for the following year. But he said, you know what? A thank you would have meant as much. Hey, you did a great job. Would have been just as important to me. The money's great. The money's great. But it's easy to extract money from this business than it is to extract appreciation. And there was kind of an important lesson for me going forward there, working with those guys. So valuing people is the most important. Claudia, you said autonomy. you wouldn't get autonomy unless you were valued and trusted. So that's in there. Empowerment, you have to trust people for them to be empowered. And to be trusted, you have to be valued. So it comes from this stem of valuing people. The next one links to your second point, Claudia, about everyone's opinion being relevant, everybody turning up with their brain, not being scared to speak, and thinking critically. So that's not being critical, it's about thinking critically, objectively, using the power of logic, deduction, to think about what's emerging in the organization that you can then, for the third wheel, pineapple, to seize opportunities. So if people feel valued, they'll speak more freely. From the free thinking, you'll get more ideas generated through the critical thinking, which gives you more opportunities to be seized. So if I think this very afternoon, there's a leader at ECIS who values the people around her. I certainly feel valued when I work with Cam, and Nancy does too, Amy does, Caroline does. Give us a nod, Caroline, thank you very much.
Yeah, definitely.
So we feel valued working with Cam. As a result of that, we generate more ideas. Let's do loft learning. Let's do this. Let's do that. Can I have a singer at the conference? So we generate ideas that might not be within the normal parameters of what's expected. We seize those opportunities and run with them. And you're with us this afternoon seeing one of the benefits of those. So I think we're living an example of a high performance environment through ECIS, thanks to Cam's leadership. What's next, Nancy? There we go. So I have a problem when I talk about competencies with school folk, because you talk about behavior a lot, right? And often we classify behavior as good or bad in the school environment. So chatting in class and writing notes and being on your phone, bad behavior. Good behavior, being compliant, sitting, looking up front, paying full attention. And when I talk about behaviors, I talk about anything that a human being does or says. So anything that we do or say is a behavior. And then they get clustered into patterns of behavior that organizations say are important to us. So if we think about behaviors that are important to us, often they revolve around people or task or thinking or energy. And energy, I mean, in terms of drive and motivation. So if we have a look at the next slide, we'll see how those are split. So I did some work where we developed a model of competencies. So we listed the behaviors that were important for people who worked at British Airways. And British Airways think that the things that are most important to them revolve around task. So doing your checklist pre-flight, quite important, right? Do we have enough fuel? Everybody in, door shut, and about thinking. British Airways, for anybody who's flown on BA, are relatively light on people, on paying attention to people, either as members of crew or as customers. And I certainly feel like that. I know that the crew are going through their pre-flight checks, but I don't feel particularly important in as a passenger, right? I feel a bit like cattle. When I used to fly Virgin Atlantic, they used to fly from London to Dubai all the time. Every day, I used to catch that at least once a fortnight. And their competencies say, we want people who can focus on people. We want people who can focus on energy, who've got drive and motivation for their work. The task, we'll get to it. If we shut the doors, we shut the doors, we're having a good time. And if we don't want people who are too bright, we don't want lots of thinking because everything's kind of routine anyway. So here's an example of two organizations who have a different emphasis on how they do things. So what I'd like you to do is just shout out for me. If you think about where you work, where do you have most emphasis in terms of what people are required to pay attention to? Are people required to pay attention to other people, to the task, to thinking, or to energy? Oh, there we are. The camera's just writing to me from Cam, people and task. Okay. So getting things done through the people around you. Thank you very much, Mr. Choham. Anybody else? You can shout them out if you want to, because as Nancy said, we've gone rogue.
I would say also the same, people and Definitely people. I think in education, connections are always, and relationships are priority before anything else. You have so many schools, and that's what differentiates schools, is how you feel about that school when you meet with. So I'm going to put people as the top when it comes to my experience in education.
Okay, all right. I'm curious, Amy, are you in there? Would you give us a shout out for Arts International? Where do you think we are?
Yeah, so I've definitely put people and energy.
Yeah. I would have put people and thinking for us. We're quite like we've got 3 out of 4 because I haven't got much energy. Who else do we have in there? Anybody else? So you get a flavor that any job, any organization will think about these 4 things, and there aren't really other things to think about in terms of the way people behave. They focus on these things, and what we've tried to do with Arts International Pineapple is we decided earlier that to say next slide please is a bit tacky, so we've got a secret word. See if you can spot it. So at Arts International, what we try to focus on is building a focus on people, a focus on tasks, getting the job done, a focus on thinking, and a focus on energy. So we're building all of the competencies, all of the behaviors that people need in whatever work they decide to do or whatever career path they decide to follow. And we do that by focusing on confidence. And if you imagine, as we're taking performers around the world from theatre, TV, and movies to develop these behaviors in students, there's nothing more dramatic or exciting than building confidence by asking students to stand on stage, speak a few words under a spotlight. That's a way to build confidence, to give them practice of that, rather like we're doing now. Once you've developed some level of confidence, because if you haven't developed that, you're unlikely to come out of your bedroom. You're unlikely to come out of your little shell, your little bubble that you create. So until we've got a bit of confidence, it's very difficult to think about new ways of approaching the world around us. So if we can create a non-judgmental environment where people can play with ideas, can play with being who they are and how they sound and what they do and what they look like, you can develop creativity. Once we develop creativity, we can say, right, how do I link my creativity with your creativity? How do we collaborate? How do we bring things together? And I think some of the work that we've been doing with ECIS is a great example of, provide great examples of collaboration, of trying things out in different ways to bring different ways of thinking together. And if you're a student working on a production or working on a piece of drama or some aspect of the performing arts, collaborating with other people becomes really important. And the performing arts, along with physical education, are the only 2 subjects in school that have defined leadership roles, that provide behavioral feedback and allow collaboration to create a team or a cast or a spirit of coming together. And once we've done that, there's really no more effective way of developing compassion than wearing somebody else's clothes, literally standing in their shoes, seeing through their eyes at how the world looks from a different perspective. So we know, Amy knows through her performance background of what must be 15 years now since you graduated, Amy? 10 probably? Or my 300 years since I graduated, much older, that if we can develop confidence, creativity, collaboration, and compassion, then the students who pass through our work are a more 3-dimensional, rounded, more holistic, I'm sorry, I'm at an airport, you'll hear an engine in the background in a moment, compassionate version of themselves to go and present to the world. So what we're trying to do is develop those competencies that prepare students for university and for the world of work, which is really different from what a lot of schools do now. What a lot of schools do now seem to, and please challenge me, I'm up for a challenge, is prepare students to develop individual work, to write individual essays, to pass individual exams, and then not really to have conversations with other people about other things. And I was lucky enough, no, I wasn't, I worked hard for it, 4 years on a panel at Oxford, interviewing interviewing undergraduates to come onto the psychology degree program. And only 11% of applicants made it through the interview process. 89% of them didn't. It's arithmetic. And the reason that they didn't was that students couldn't tell a story about who they were and what's important to them, what area of research or area of psychology were they interested in pursuing, and to play with an idea or a concept. Like, what do you think generates intelligence? Is it nature or nurture? Just playing with an idea that should be quite familiar to them. And 89% of students couldn't do that to the level that was required to enter a college at Oxford to study psychology. Now, I know after a day with us, when students have found their voice on a program that we offer, it's a very ropey engine. I think there's going to be a crash coming from my ear. So when students can't tell the story of who they are, what's important to them, and the area that they might be interested in researching, or can't play with an idea, they don't get in. But we can teach that in a day. We can teach improvisation, where you take an idea and build on it. So I know, as an interviewer for Oxbridge, that students that have been with us have a much better chance of getting into those colleges because they've developed some of the skills that underpin the performing arts. It's that simple. So you get a better chance at university, you get a better chance in the world of work because you've followed and developed some interpersonal, intrapersonal skills that can be developed beautifully through the performing arts. You become a more rounded medic, more rounded lawyer, a better consultant, a better leader or manager, and frankly, a better partner, parent, and friend.
You know, Andrew, what you mentioned makes me think about what we're currently doing in education. We're looking at a curriculum. Are we truly preparing students in terms of current workforce, current expectations? Like I'm giving the IB, for example. You said that very well. You have the IAs, which are individual, but yet when you enter the workforce, the idea of connections and collaborations, that's key to, I would say, so many organizations right now. Are schools correctly preparing students once they graduate? You've had the experience with the university, but do you think this is happening really globally, that we really aren't providing the skill set that kids need to once they leave?
We're hearing it all the time. I hear it from employers, from the HR communities I'm part of. The students coming out of university aren't prepared for the world of work. I hear it from, Tony Blair. About 3 weeks ago, the Tony Blair Foundation published a report which said that the education system in the UK is no longer fit for purpose. It doesn't prepare students for what they will face. He said that instead of GCSE, it should be a general certificate in skills and empathy. And then Tony Blair said, it really should be based on the 4C's. And he used our 4C's. I was kind of touched. It was only a quick conversation we had with him. But he genuinely said that these 4C's are really important to prepare students for the world of work. And Amy and I were chatting earlier that if you ask a student why they're at that particular school, why that international school that costs $20,000, why not the one next door? Students really should be able to say, I'm here because it will prepare me for work, or prepare me for study, prepare me for life, because it's doing these three things. And I don't think schools know clearly enough what those three things are. And I suspect that the students therefore don't know why they're there.
Look, I think, you told me a wonderful story about a consultant for Honda. Was it Honda?
Yeah, no, you're right. It was me. So I was working as a McKinsey consultant for Honda. They were opening a big new car factory in Swindon. This was about 25 years ago. And around Swindon, there were lots of factories. So you could pick up employees and supervisors and engineers from all these different places. But we decided to use a behavioral model. One of the key criteria, the key competencies, was leadership. So we listed out what good leaders do, what the behaviors were, and then we interviewed people. The best candidate was George. Never worked in a factory in his life. Decided he wanted to change. George had been a greengrocer. but he'd been a greengrocer who got up at 5 o'clock every morning, drove to London, bought the stock and came back. George had a team of people that he led and managed, that he could trust while he was away to manage the takings. He was respected. So we collected those behaviours from George. There were some engineers in the factory who didn't want to appoint George because he'd never worked in a factory before. Star performer in year 1, because we use behaviours rather than a CV model to recruit and select. And I know Cam and I have been talking about recruiting using behaviours to promote diversity and inclusion based on what teachers can do rather than what it says on their CV.
Exactly. Thank you. I remember that resonated with me just in terms of just looking at, this sounds awful. Is it the person who has that Ivy League education? We're looking at those connections of making those people feel like they're valued, what you said, and in terms of just building that community. So thank you for sharing that story. I mean, I love what you have next here in terms of what you're doing with Arts International and the impact that you're making, because like I started off this session, it's more than just the singing and the dancing. It's really that idea of elevating the student's voice. And maybe he didn't have a platform for this voice in another place at the school, but now that platform has been provided for this child.
I'm going to pass to Amy, who has a lovely story about a child who's just recently found a place.
Yes, thank you. And Nancy, I remember you telling me about your son and how that impacted him. And it's very similar, this story. So I was working at school 2 weeks ago in Dubai, and we were working with year 1 students, so around about 5 years old. And we had a big class, and we were doing a poem. We're looking at a poem about me, and it was all about self and self-identity and how we can link that, and having a sense of belonging and who am I, you know. And so we were doing this poem, and we were talking it through on the board, and I was very aware there was a small boy whose name was Oscar, and Oscar's the name of my son, so I immediately recognized the name and felt a connection there. And he was not interested in what we were doing at all. He didn't make eye contact with me. He didn't appear to be listening, although I knew later on that he was. He was sat with his teacher, who was trying to distract him with an iPad and a book, and was trying to basically keep him in the classroom. But it was very evident to me through his body language and his energy that he wasn't comfortable where he was, and he wanted to be doing something else. Anyway, so we, as a class, we went through the poem, and I said, would anyone like to get up in front of their classmates and read the poem in groups of 4? And I think I must have leant down to pick up my water bottle. And as I did, I pulled my head up, and Oscar was stood right at the front of the class in front of everybody. And suddenly I was aware that Oscar was there. And I said, okay, Oscar, fantastic. And I kind of whisked past it, really. Didn't want to make too much of a big deal about the fact that Oscar had decided to stand at the front of the class. And 3 of his classmates came to join him. And I was then very aware that his teacher and the teaching assistant had stood up, and they both had their iPads, and they were recording from the back of the room, and they had big wide eyes and massive smiles on their faces. So I knew this was a big deal. And I said, let's read the poem. And so we did it together, and Oscar made perfect eye contact with me. He read with his friends perfectly. There was no element to him or his energy about the fact that he didn't want to be there or he wanted to be somewhere else. He was absolutely in that room with us for that 30 seconds to 40 seconds it took to read that poem. And after we finished, he got a big round of applause, as did everybody. And he went back to his iPad, and all of his friends went and sat back down. But for that 40 seconds, he was completely and utterly engrossed and engaged in what we were doing. And the teachers had this lovely moment to forward on to his parents and his carers about what he had done that day. And at the end of the session, the teacher came up to me and they said, I just, out of everything that we saw in that, hour and a half session, the one thing was that 40 seconds, that magical 40 seconds that Oscar had, that he very rarely taps into. And that was a lovely moment for me, just to know that we had, we'd made contact in some way with Oscar was a lovely feeling.
I think you should go for a double Oscar win today, Amy. Would you tell us that other story?
So I was telling Andrew this a little bit earlier in the week, actually. So my Oscar, my son, is 11. And for anybody who has a child or has had a child who has just transitioned from primary to secondary, you will know the feeling. You will know that anxious feeling as a parent that you get when your child is making that big move. And I remember taking him in on day one and just being so full of hope for him and thinking about it all day. And then I went to go and pick him up from the school at the end of the day. And he walked up to me, and I could just tell by the look on his face that he had not had a good time. And so my heart dropped instantly, and that feeling of anxiety crept in very quickly. And I put my arm around him and said, let's talk about it in the car. And so we talked about it in the car, and he explained that he was on his own. He didn't really speak to anybody all day. He didn't eat lunch with anybody. He was basically on his own all day. And that continued for the first 2 days of his, first 2 days at school. And I very, very nearly sent a very strong email to the class teacher, but I resisted. And I thought, you know what, there's a reason why Oscar has been left on his own, because a lot of his classmates were put together and he was the only one that wasn't with anybody that he knew. I thought there's a reason why, and we will discover that reason together. And I'm a big one for, when you're out of your comfort zone, it makes you stronger. It makes you look for moments, where you can find that certainty. And for the whole week, the whole first week, I would get him in the car, and on the journey home, I would say to him, how are you doing today, mate? How was it? Did you meet any new friends? And there would be the odd name that would come back. But for the first 4 days, it was pretty bleak. And on day 5, and as I mentioned before, we live in Dubai. And so we have a Monday to Friday working week, but because Friday is the holy day, all schools break out before midday. So my husband was with me, and we parked up in the school car park, and he phoned me, Oscar, phoned me and said, where are you? And I said, Daddy and I are in the car park. We're waiting for you. And he said to me, okay. He said, I've just put my name down for the school musical. They're doing Oliver. And I turned to Alex, because he was on loudspeaker. I turned to Alex, and tears welled up in my eyes. And I said, mate, that is fantastic. Tell us all about it when you get to the car. Oh, I'm getting emotional. I apologize. This is the first time I've said it out loud. And he got in the car and he said to me, I put my name down for Oliver. And I went, that is absolutely brilliant. Well done, you. And later that night, I turned to my husband and I said, you know what, regardless, my husband's in the industry as well. So we're both performers. I said, regardless of it being the musical, that's not the thing. That's not the point. The thing for me is that he's put his name down for something that takes him out of his comfort zone, and therefore I know he's going to be okay. He's going to be all right. He's going to be okay. And about 4 days later, he got in the car, and he said to me, I've got some really good news. And I said, what's the good news? He said, I've got Oliver. I've got the part of Oliver in the musical. And so obviously I was extremely proud and said, mate, that's incredible. Well done. You've been there 3 weeks and you've got the main part. And he said, but you know what was the best thing, Mum? He said, when the board went up, when the note went up of the cast list, he said, I was surrounded by all of my friends from my previous school, and they all clapped and cheered when they read my name out. And a lot of the children that I didn't know who were walking past me in the corridor said, are you Oscar? That's amazing. Well done. Congratulations. And now, 3 weeks into school, I go and I pick him up from school. And I went to pick him up after a production rehearsal yesterday, actually, late after school. And he was absolutely giddy and full of confidence and full of energy. And he was waving to all of his friends as we were leaving. Bye, Sydney, and bye, Isla, and nice to see you, Aidan, see you tomorrow. And, Aidan is year 13 because it's across the school. So he now, because of being part of that production theatre community within his school, he now has friends that range from year 7 all the way up to year 13. And he's connected with people on such a level because he is in an environment which allows him to explore, create, be collaborative. And that's nothing to do with what Arts International do. That's, but that's the power of being part of a performing community. is that you not only do you make friends and do you build your confidence, you know, but you get to explore a little bit more about yourself as well. And I've seen that in my own son over the past 3 weeks, which has been magical for me to see that, because I preach it all the time, but to see it, you know, actual evidence in your own home is extremely, extremely powerful. And I know he's going to be okay. He's absolutely going to be fine.
Amy, that's, you know what? You and Andrew were the perfect first guests, and I'll tell you why. Because when you talk about your work, you say it with, first of all, such sincerity and with such integrity that it touches your heart because you're impacting students' lives. So to have you as the first studio guest was perfect, because I can, even though this is virtual, I can feel the connection that you're creating just virtually. I can't imagine what you do with students. When I look at this map and where you're working with in terms of Milan and Zurich, I know you've been in Dubai, that I can't imagine when you're on site, the impact that you're making on these kids. I mean, when I see some of these quotes that you had here, it resonates with how you spoke today in terms of your work and really elevating those 4C's. I mean, the idea of confidence and that collaboration, this is something we want all our kids to be. So right now, I want us to do a silent reflection. And I give you this one thought. What is your schools doing, if you're one of 2 schools, to develop and promote these competencies? So if you had to think right now, and I would say, okay, everyone, make a list of what you're doing. I know so many schools are doing brilliant work to develop these competencies. It's beautiful. You see it all the time in terms of in social media, in terms of YouTube and what they're doing. It's amazing what they're doing. But I guess the question is, are we doing enough knowing the value of these competencies in terms of today? And that's where I ask you just to reflect for a minute. We just have a quiet pause just to think about this. What are we doing within our schools? And it doesn't even have to be within our schools. It could be within our classroom or within our team that we work with.
Within our family.
Yeah, our family, thank you. Just a silent moment. We're coming to the end. It's already 56. I know we had so much fun, and thank you for being here. Andrew and Amy, you have 1 minute to say goodbye to the lovely people who joined us today. So what would be your 1 minute goodbye to everyone?
Mine would be to think about what your school is doing to prepare students for the world as we know it, not as we imagine it's going to be. So how useful are those A stars and that first class honours degree if you can't show compassion to other people, you can't be creative with what you know, and you can't collaborate? So my goodbye is think about how you can promote behaviours, and of course give us a call and we'll help, because it's what we do. Thanks everybody. It was a real treat to spend some time with you, and that was the quickest hour of my life.
No, wait, final word before we go.
Yes, I would echo what Andrew said, actually, and just add in, I think that in the world that we are living in currently, I think everybody from all aspects of industry, walks of life, I think they are expecting far more from us now than just being good at what we do. We have to be great speakers. We have to be great leaders. We have to be compassionate. We have to be human. The one thing that I want more than anything from my government back home is for them just to see them cry, to see them emote, to feel like they understand us and they're with the people. I think that we expect more of our leaders, of our managers, of our teams now. And I think that these skills are so important to help people with uncertainty, resilience, with making change. And I think we need to put more emphasis on those skills, because I think with the world as it's turning and as how it's been and the way it's going, I think that we need more of that. We need, you know, less emphasis on how we do it, and more on the doing.
And thank you. She actually, Amy, just resonating with James, just also added something in the chat about the economic forum. So James, thank you for adding that very much. So before
Nancy, if I just may, I'm really sorry to do this, but I had a note and I didn't have it with me, but I just wanted to compare how 6 different countries managed the pandemic. We had Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand, we had Angela Merkel in Germany, and we had Sanna in Finland, compared with Bolsonaro in Brazil, Trump in America, and Boris in London. Those 2 distinct camps had more that separated them than gender. And we'll leave you with that thought. Have a good evening.
So hopefully, we like to say that when you go to a learning opportunity like this, there's always a change in behavior or in action. So I'm hoping that you can think about on Monday, what will you do? Will you look at what you're currently doing in your school? You might even say, you know what, something Andrew and Amy actually resonated with me. I might do further contact. You know, we have the website. I've been putting it on LinkedIn, and we'll have this recording out there. So think about what will you do on, oh, today's not Monday. Yeah, no, today's Thursday, but I wanted Monday to give you time to relax. You know, you need time to process. So before everybody, again, I want to thank you to, first of all, you can unmute everybody and give our guest lovely round of applause. Woo-hoo! I love it. Second of all, thank you for the launch of the ECIS Studio. I am so excited to continue this. I'm thrilled that we've had such a lovely turnout. There is something I do believe in, and that we put our cameras on. So those who don't, try to put your cameras on. And we kind of like say goodbye by doing a high five. So everyone has to put their hands against the screen. And on the count of 3, we go high five. 1, 2, 3, high five. Okay, we're doing to the person on the side. So I have Andrew and Cam. Let's do it again. 1, 2, 3, high five. You guys are wonderful. So I wish you all the best to you and your families. Thank you, Andrew and Amy, for being here. It's an honor for you to launch the studio tonight. And everyone else, have a lovely, lovely evening, or morning or afternoon, and be safe and keep up with the studio. We have more to come. So thank you and have a good night, everybody. Great job.